The camping trip. It was a warm summer evening when a group of 5 teenagers set out for a weekend camping trip in the woods. They'd all been friends since they were little, and this was a yearly tradition they always looked forward to. But this year was different. This year, something was waiting for them in the woods. As they set up camp and started a campfire, they laughed and joked, feeling excited about the adventure that lay ahead. As they ate their dinner, one of the girls, Lily, suddenly stopped talking and stared into the woods. "Guys, did you hear that?" she asked. Everyone turned to listen, but they heard nothing. "Hear what?" asked Jake, one of the boys. "I don't know, it sounded like something moving in the bushes," said Lily. "Relax, it's probably just a deer or something," said Tyler, another boy in the group. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. As the night went on, they told ghost stories and laughed. But Lily kept looking over her shoulder. Finally, they all went to bed. Lily was sharing a tent with her best friend, Sarah. As they settled in, Lily whispered to Sarah, "I don't like it here. Something doesn't feel right." But Sarah just laughed it off. "Stop being such a scaredy cat and go to bed." As they drifted off to sleep, Lily heard something rustling outside their tent. She held her breath, but it stopped. She tried to convince herself it was just an animal, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Suddenly, they were all jolted awake by a loud noise. They heard branches snapping and leaves crunching. They quickly grabbed their flashlights and ran out of their tents to see what was happening. As they shone their flashlights in the direction of the noise, they saw a figure in the shadows. It was tall and dark with glowing eyes. They all froze, too scared to move. "What the hell is that?" whispered Lily. His body heaved as if it took lumbering breaths, his limbs moving in unnatural motions that made the mind recoil in fear, almost as if they were changing shape before their eyes. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," said Sarah. "I don't know," the monster repeated in a sinister tone, the sound of earth rattling in its throat. As they turned to run, they heard the figure start to chase them. They could hear its footsteps getting closer and closer. Tyler stumbled and fell in the darkness, but there was no time to stop. Finally, they burst through the trees and saw their car parked in the clearing. Fumbling for the keys, Jake finally got the doors unlocked, and the car started as Tyler finally caught up. Without a moment's hesitation, they took off down the road, scanning the rear view for any sign of the monster. They all heaved a sigh of relief. "What the hell even was that?" Jake asked. "I don't know," Tyler said, through blood-stained teeth. Campfire stories. Last summer I went to sleepaway camp. One time they took us on a hike into the woods, and we set up tents and built a fire. We cooked hot dogs and marshmallows on sticks, and we told ghost stories. One of the counselors told us a story about a lady who was thrown into a well on a nearby farm 100 years ago. It was really scary, the way he held the flashlight under his chin while he was telling it. Her husband didn't like her, so he threw her in the well and she died down there. When they found her, she had no meat on the ends of her fingers and the bones were poking through. I remember how the counselor leaned forward, his face a mask of shadows and light in the flashlight beam. They thought maybe she'd worn the ends of her fingers off, trying to climb out the well, he said. But there was no blood on the walls. Maybe the rain washed the blood away. Or maybe she got hungry, down there in the dark all alone. So hungry she started to eat herself. He paused, and the only sound was the crackling of the campfire. They say there's a thing that lives in the woods now. It's quiet and hard to see, but it has gleaming white fingers like wet bones. It tries to sneak up on you, but don't let it. Because when it finds you, I was already wound up tight as a spring, so when the counselor suddenly pointed behind us and screamed, "Look out," I almost peed. I don't think I was the only one. Then all the counselors were laughing, and I felt kind of dumb, but I couldn't stop being scared. A couple of the other kids were crying. The counselors told us to stop being such babies. They put out the fire and we got in our tents. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and something was happening. I unzipped my tent and crawled outside. One of the counselors was on her phone, saying something about needing emergency aid. The others were standing in front of Nathan's tent, nervous and white-faced. Everybody was getting out of their tents by now, and the counselors told us to break down the camp and pack up. So we did. Except for Nathan's tent. We were almost done when the grown-ups from the camp showed up. They started unzipping the tent as the counselors tried to herd us back down the trail to the cabins. I couldn't help but look back. Our parents came and got us the next day. They said a wild animal got into Nathan's tent, in the night. But if that's true, why didn't anybody hear it? Why wasn't his tent messed up? And why did it eat only his fingers, leaving the wet bones to shine in the morning sun? Is it coming for me? Haunted cabin. The crackling of the fire echoed through the old secluded cabin, casting flickering shadows across the room. The wind howled outside, making the surrounding trees sway and creak. Inside, a small group of friends huddled together, seeking solace from the bitter cold. They'd ventured deep into the woods, far from civilization, seeking an adventure they would soon come to regret. The cabin itself had a dark history. Legend had it was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the restless dead haunted its halls. The locals warned of strange occurrences and disappearances that plague anyone foolish enough to spend a night within its walls. But the group, fueled by youthful curiosity, brushed off the warnings and settled in for the night. As the night grew darker, the atmosphere within the cabin became tense. The fire provided a meager amount of comfort, barely enough to ward off the bone-chilling cold that swept through the windows and doors. Uneasy glances were exchanged among the friends, their nerves on edge. They tried to distract themselves with idle conversation, but an eerie silence hung heavily in the air. Suddenly, a soft whisper emerged from the darkness. It was barely audible, but it sent shivers down their spines. They glanced at each other in fear, their eyes wide with apprehension. The whisper grew louder, gradually transforming into a haunting chant. The friends covered their ears, desperately trying to drown out the sound, but it echoed relentlessly in their heads. The cabin's walls seemed to pulse with malevolent energy as if they were alive. The windows rattled violently, and the wind outside intensified. The fire, once comforting, took an ominous glow and cast grotesque shadows on the walls. The friends huddled closer together, seeking refuge in each other's presence, their hearts pounding in their chests. A figure emerged from the darkness, slowly materializing before their terrified eyes. It was a ghostly apparition, pale and ethereal, clad in tattered clothing. Its eyes glowed with a malevolence that pierced through their souls. The friends tried to scream, but their voices were silenced by an invisible force that suffocated them. One by one, the friends began to vanish. They simply disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only a gust of wind and a sense of impending doom. Panic consumed those who remained, their sanity hanging by a thread. The cabin itself seemed to twist and contort, the walls closing in on them, trapping them within its nightmarish embrace. In the final moments before their sanity gave way, they glimpsed a glimmer of hope. A journal lay on a dusty shelf, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and incantations. With trembling hands they deciphered the ancient text, hoping to find a way to break the curse that held them captive. With each chant, the cabin trembled, the malevolent presence fading into the night. The friends found themselves standing outside the cabin, surrounded by the haunting beauty of the moonlit forest. The cabin itself stood silent and foreboding, a reminder of the horrors they had endured. They walked away, scarred by the experience, vowing never to speak of it again. The memory of that fateful night would forever haunt their dreams, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within the shadows. The fire that once brought them comfort now represented the terrors they'd faced, and they could never look at it the same way again. As they retreated to the safety of civilization, they could only hope that the spirits they'd encountered would remain within the cabin's walls, forever imprisoned by the ancient incantations. But deep down they knew that some horrors could never be truly contained. The echoes of that night would linger, like a chilling breeze that whispered through their minds. They would find themselves plagued by nightmares, with ghostly apparitions appearing in their sleep, tormenting them with their pale, lifeless eyes. My friend and I heard the last sounds of a person's life while camping. I've never been much of an outdoor person, but the summer after my second year in college, one of my roommates convinced me to go to camping with him. It was only over the weekend, and I wasn't doing anything anyway, so I said I'd go with him, and for the sake of privacy I'll call him Jake. Now Jake would go all out. He had a 2014 Jeep Wrangler, the entire back seat filled almost completely with different camping gear. He didn't like to reserve spots at actual campsites, but instead find his own spots, which he said made it more fun. We drove up into the Rocky Mountains for a while, until we found a break in the trees with enough space to fit the Jeep through. We then drove off-road between trees until we pointed out a good spot. We set up a fire pit, chairs, and the tent we'd be staying in for the night. It was already around 7 PM, and the sun was starting to set. Jake went to the car and pulled out a bag of hot dogs for us to cook over the fire. Real original, I know, but they were an easy meal, and Jake wanted to give me the true camping experience as it was my first time. He even bought stuff for s'mores, although we never got that far. As we were cooking the hot dogs, there was an extremely loud female screaming, maybe 300 or 400 feet away. I looked up and saw Jake's head turn towards the direction of the screams. At first there weren't any words we could make out, but then there was a help, a please, and a no, all of them sounding more desperate than the last. Then the loudest, most terrifying scream was abruptly cut off mid-scream. Jake looked back in my direction. The look on his face was pure horror. As far as we knew, the closest man-made structure was the road, and even that was far away. No one should have been out here. Whatever it was that we just heard didn't matter. We knew we needed to leave as fast as possible. We started frantically throwing things into the back of the Jeep, stuffed the still fully made tent inside, and as we closed the door I tried calling 911 as we started driving back to the road. I had practically no service out there, but somehow managed to get it on the line with the operator. I did my best to explain what we'd heard, and they said they'd send a trooper out as soon as possible. It took us twice as long to get back to the road, just because this time we couldn't see anything. Finally we saw the pavement and stopped for a second. We didn't know if we should wait for the cops or not. That's when we saw a figure walking out from the trees in front of us. He was wearing jeans with an all-black sweatshirt, with a hood covering his face. He was dragging something behind him in a heavy sheet or some kind of bag. His head was down, limping as he walked. He looked over in our direction when blue and red police lights revealed themselves down the road. The man turned his head and started sprinting back into the forest, letting go of the bag. The police saw this and started chasing after him. The bag he was dragging turned out to contain the remains of a 34-year-old woman. We aren't sure if the man was ever caught, but one thing is certain. I'll probably never go camping again.